Hello, friends. It's a delight to be here with my teacher, Rabbi Danny Landis, who's the founder and director of Yashrut, which, among its many activities, is also a yeshiva and a smicha program, and it's working to restore moral integrity to Judaism. And Rabbi Landis has been a teacher of Torah for many decades, and many of us are proud to be his students. So there's so much to talk about, but today the question I want to ask you, that many think about, is halacha moral? Meaning, these are two different ideas, halacha, Jewish law, and morality, how humans should behave properly. And are those two in sync? Is the halacha itself moral?
Well, it's wonderful to be here. I've been on a lot of planes, and I'll eventually get a lot faster, even faster than the planes I was on. Well, this problem of is halacha moral, or should we even use the word moral in regard to the halacha? Halacha is the way, is the path that God has told us, and therefore to use morality seems to be an external way of doing it. But we know being moral is so important to us. How do we put the two things together? It hasn't always been a problem. I think that's what I want to get to. It hasn't. Jews have found a way. Not just a way. It was very natural for Jews, for the rabbis, for those who really created the system of halacha, the path of incorporating the highest and sometimes even just low in the sense of just normal moral concerns. And I've been thinking about that for the past couple of days. I wrote myself some notes. I'm doing some teaching on it as I'm starting to think about this. We have a question about, let's talk even just religiously. Why should we make a blessing before we eat and before we do any sort of consumption? And the Talmud in Barachot has all sorts of verses and ways of figuring it out, and then it turns out the verses don't work. And the Talmud says, look, it's svara, which means moral intuition, moral logic. Someone does something nice to you, for you, you say thank you. Or they're about to do something good for you. So we're about to consume what God has given us. You should say thank you. There's no verse. It's considered moral intuition. I've been thinking about this thing. I'm sorry if I'm quoting from myself. When the rabbis in the Talmud were trying to figure out a situation in which we were told not to observe Judaism, and by the Romans, and that we would have to give that up. And it's kind of a classic discussion. And the rabbis come up with this thing that you need to preserve life and keep your life, except for three major areas, and I'll talk about that in 5 seconds. But we're supposed to preserve our life. Why? Well, here there is a verse. The verse says, "You shall do the mitzvot, v'chai b'hem, you shall live by them." But the normal understanding of that in all the generations since the Torah was given was, if you want to live, then observe the commandments. The commandments will give you life. Therefore, observe the commandments, and v'chai b'hem, this will bring you to life. Therefore, the conclusion would be that there is the request for any absolution, or any violation of the Torah, we should rather give up our life for anything, because the Torah is life. We still have this kind of notion. But this led to very terrible destruction. And the terrible destruction it led to is that two things were happening. Either people were giving up their lives all the time, and these are usually, as it were, the best and most committed, that they, even for the smallest mitzvah, the commandment, rather than violate, they would give up their life. And those who did not give up their life, and those who rather did the violation, they became ruined for their observance. They had no notion, and I'm no longer an observant Jew. I'm no longer part of the community. It was a terrible situation. They came up with a new way of understanding a verse. They never understood the verse before this way. And where did it come from? It came from a moral intuition. And here's what the moral intuition said. You should observe my mitzvot, v'chai bahem. But, also the vav doesn't mean and or therefore. For the first time, the vav, which is a prepositional phrase, one letter, prepositional phrase means as long as you're going to live by it. Oh, except for 3. Don't commit murder. Don't do rape. No idolatry. Why these 3? Well, these 3. You could give up a lot of things in your relationship to God, but if you commit idolatry, then you've really broken, not bent. And a lot of things in terms of sexual relations but rape is a violation of knowing and being related to the other. Murder, we do a lot of things against our brothers and our sisters. You have murder, you're out of the community, you're gone. So for those 3 things, but only those 3 things. Where did this come from? This came from, and I don't know if Rabbi, I have the time for one more.
Yeah, please.
Okay, small thing. You go to a shiva, and you go to a shiva. Someone has died. They're sitting in mourning. You bring fruit. According to the custom, the rich brought it on gold trays, and the middle class, as it were, on silver trays, and the poor put it on just regular trays of woven material. It's very simple. And then the rabbis said, we can't actually do this anymore. We're embarrassing those who are poor. All of us will do it on the most basic means of the trade. We're embarrassing, so let them be embarrassed. We would say today often in our crassness, or let them make some more money, or let them show up and just suck it up. No, the rabbi said, moral intuition says, cancel this halacha of everyone giving according to their thing. We're all going to give in the most basic mode. Mm-hmm. When the rabbis decided that the dancing that would take place of women dancing, in a sense, in a very modest way, showing themselves to the guys at the end of Yom Kippur and one other time during the year, and this would happen, the rabbis decided they're not allowed to dance in their own garment. They dance in the garment they exchange with their friends, because all women, all people must be equal in this situation. Don't look at their garments, because the garments are all exchanged. Look at the type of person that is there. The rabbis changed the halacha. Why? Because we have to have morality. But where's the verse? You don't need a verse. Don't you know how to be moral?
So what I hear you saying so far is that the halacha now is not moral, but it should be. And if we're following the authentic rabbinic tradition, then we need to do more work to make sure it should be. Is that what you're saying, more or less?
I am actually saying it even stronger. Uh-huh. That we're doing offense to halacha, but by not bringing in the moral way of acting. It's a mitzvah in the Torah to be married to more than for a man to continue his possibility of being productive. So therefore, according to the Bible, you can be married to more than one woman. According to the rabbis, the early rabbis, you should be married to more than one woman. And then in the Middle Ages, the rabbis cut that out. Why did they cut that out? They said it's a great thing, but it all leads to kittata. It leads to strife. It leads to arguments. In fact, they go so far that if a man loses his wife and has to remarry, he should, and he's had children, he has fulfilled the mitzvah of being pruvu, of the procreation that he's supposed to be part of. And he fulfilled that with his first wife. but the rabbi, but still the mitzvah is there to be. Don't stop at the evening, as the verse says. Continue your life in that way. The rabbi says, you know what? Nah, we're going to have to change that. We're going to have to cancel that mitzvah. You fulfilled it, but cancel the continuation of that. You know why? Because it always leads to kittata, strife between the new wife and the children. Because the children see the heirs will be the new young babies from the second wife, and therefore should consider being married again, because your life has to continue, but not with a woman who's ready to have children. She's past that. She's past that period. They cancel the mitzvah. You know why? Because it's immoral. But it's not immoral in some fancy way. Everyone knows this problem.
Yeah.
Everyone understands what this difficulty can be.
So there's the moral that's eternal. There's the eternal morality that in all ages, and then there's the moral sensibilities of our moment. And we can state it stronger than that. But things that 100 years ago people didn't think the way we think. We think that LGBTQ rights. We think about women's equality. We think about racial justice. These are real moral issues for us in a way that they weren't 100 years ago. Where do we get the sense in Torah that our moral sensibilities, our deep moral intuitions of today, are actually religiously important?
Kihi chachmatchem ubinatchem. This is your wisdom and this is your understanding. Is to use it, that the Torah, the halacha must reflect that. In a sense, and I'll just go to the controversial in terms of Orthodox Judaism. Of course, it says in the Torah that homosexual relationships are forbidden, and there have been many ways that rabbis have dealt with this. How they dealt with it? Go to this kind of therapist. Go to the conversion. Go to the conversion therapist. Today in Jerusalem, there are many people who go and are sent by their parents to take pills to kill their drive, and in some ways to actually have the effect of being not circumcised, being
celibate,
not being celibate. Another C word. When you no longer have the physical capacity, and often that's done by. They go for chemicals in this direction.
Yeah.
Therefore, rendering the individual into a non-person.
Yeah.
None of this has worked. None of this has happened. So there has to be, and I'm not doing it today.
Castration?
Castration. Chemical castration.
Oh, I see.
You have that now. So this is a self-denying, self-defeating, self-destructive direction. What should be okay, I'm ready to talk about other possibilities about this. But it can't be, but no one should say that it hasn't been done. It's been dealt with, and it's been a failure all the way through, creating a mean-spirited and awful life for a lot of people. That's where we have to start. It's not we have to say, well, we don't know what to do. We know what we can't do. So if we can't do that, so what still happens? I'll cut to the chase, but I have to prove it to you at another time. But basically, the prohibitions of the Torah regarding homosexual behavior can only, because God is merciful, and the Torah is, both God and the Torah are called Rachmanah in the Talmud, the merciful one. These prohibitions are for wanton behavior and not for someone who has been created by God in God's image in this form. How do you deal with the contradictions for another time? Yeah. But we have to actually be honest to ourselves. This is our chachmat chem. This is our moral values. Thank God we have an opportunity to try to fulfill that for everyone.
Yeah. So one last question on this point. So there's a Reb Sadia Gaon, which I heard 15 years ago from Rabbi Saul Berman, although I never saw it inside, where he basically says, revelation and reason, if there's a contradiction, you're doing one of them wrong. You're either reading the revelation wrong, or you're engaging in the improper reason, and you got to go back to this side and make it work, go to this side and work, but eventually it'll always work. Do you think that's more or less right? I mean, he's talking revelation, reason, we're talking ethics and law, but morality and law. But do you think that anything is not resolvable? Or do you think at the end of the day, if we work hard enough, that the halacha can be fully moral?
I think that reason, first of all, we have to say that reason can become holy. And that reason doesn't have to be a dismissal of the transcendent that actually reason can be an aid in finding the holy. And then as the holy must not be unreasonable, anti-reason. The holy cannot be that way. So then we're making something very strange about the God that we follow, the God we believe in, and the Torah that he's given us. And we have a potential, where there's the rub, there can be fire, and where there's the rub, there can be warmth. And we can find warmth for everyone, including ourselves. So it's hard work. We've always been involved in hard work. Is it harder than a Tosfot? Maybe. Maybe there's going to be a lot of hard 4 or 5 Tosfot. But it's there for us to do. We see it every day. We've seen certain things which were impossible not so long ago. It was impossible to have, except in an unusual case, to have women who are not only Torah practitioners, but are learned in Torah. And now we find that as Torah deciders, that is the next, that's happening. Let's give it a chance. Why not?
Yeah, beautiful. So friends, please check out Yashrut if you haven't yet. It's a place you can learn, potentially. It's certainly a place you can support. And also, if you Google Rabbi Daniel Landis, you'll find his morally robust articles where he's taken a stand on societal issues, in particular of really a distaste for corruption and orthodoxy, and a perversion of the Holy Torah values in the name of religious, in religious garb. Wishing you continued bracha and hatzlacha.